Ymedia.
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 Stay tuned with Ymedia.
Ymedia is a media company. With 360-degree approach in reaching the audience over 8 media platforms. Television, Channel Y Canada, 24/7.
Hello everyone, my name is Ymedia Jaswal. I'm the group editor at Ymedia. We all know at all Ymedia platforms, we are discussing the Ymedia foreign policy consistently. There is a crisis of all sorts as far as Middle East is concerned, and it's not just Middle East. The Russia and Ukraine war hasn't ended. We all know we were expecting with President Trump getting elected, he did promise he will end that war. That war hasn't ended. February 2022, and here we are with this new war, and not only this war in Middle East with Israel, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and so many other countries. We'll talk about that as well, but there is another war happening as we speak between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So we've discussed this in earlier shows as well, from Ukraine, Russia to Iran, Israel, US getting into act right now. They're also in the midst of a war. And then you have Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Lebanon, all these countries engulfed in this war. And after Iran, you have Afghanistan and Pakistan as well. Pakistan and Afghanistan, they're fighting between themselves. But yes, definitely there is a lot of instability. And if we talk about the civilian casualties, it's not just these countries who are facing. The expats from Pakistan, India, or other countries, there have been some casualties. Pakistanis who work there or Indians who work there, they've lost their lives too. So we'll talk about that, and the civilian casualties are mounting by the day. There are a lot being wounded. The businesses are being devastated. There's a lot of oil or energy infrastructure that is being targeted. So there's lots to discuss, and we have from Ymedia our very own Ramona ji. Ramona ji, a warm welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me here. It's good to be with the people, and of course these are hard and trying times. So I want to send my condolences and prayers to all the families and people that are affected during these wars, multiple wars, as you mentioned, throughout the world.
Yeah, these are multiple wars, and if you look at the bottom of our screen, you will see that there are so many countries currently that are affected with the war right now. I mean, it's not just, generally the discussion is US is doing this, Iran is doing this, Israel is doing this. Of course, there's some discussion about other countries as well. But if you look at that, Russia and Ukraine war is still on. It hasn't stopped, and there are so many other countries. And I think it's not only the human toll which is increasing, but so many other things. And I think all these things that we are witnessing is going to have far-reaching impacts. Today in this program, we are going to discuss not only when will this war end, but more importantly, I think the more important question, we'll address this, when will this war end? We have different aspects of that. But I think more importantly, how will this war end? And how is this impacting a common person as we speak? But before I do that, a new front has also opened now. Of course, if you look at the countries, we haven't mentioned Yemen. There are other countries as well which we haven't mentioned there at the bottom of the screen. But why I'm especially mentioning Yemen? The reason I'm especially mentioning Yemen, because as much as we all know, Iran, it has its fronts which it calls the axis of resistance or a group of resistance, and it does include Hezbollah, Hamas, and Houthi rebels as well. So up until now, from February 28th, Houthis didn't get into that. And Houthis, they are quite active, and they're very dangerous as well. They've attacked many ships in that area, and we already are witnessing a lot of trouble in the Strait of Hormuz. But when you go towards the Red Sea and so many other areas, Houthis have, targeted ships. They have killed sailors. They have sunk a couple of ships as well. and they are quite active in that area. Now Houthis have got into a clear-cut act. They have attacked Israel now as well. So a new front has opened. So this war is expanding by the day. Here we are, we're talking that yes, when will this war end? We'll talk about that. What is the latest situation in the war, but and how this war will end. But we also would like to address the current situation, what's happening, because this war is, I think, expanding its base by the minute, with the Houthi rebels also coming into the action. What do you think? What are the current analysis from your side?
You know, with all these wars that are going on around the world, it appears that, you know, the conflicts that were brewing for some time, it's as if now those countries or those regionals parts are acting on it and attacking each other while the world's attention is elsewhere, right? And that's why there's still a lot of speculation in terms of what China is going to do when it comes to Taiwan, and what South Korea is going to do when it comes to North Korea, because it seems like when there's things going on, then it provokes other nations to take the steps. You know, in this war that has now been on top of mind and in every headlines, which is the war between Israel, United States, and Iran, you know, a lot of mainstream media doesn't mention why it was triggered or instigated on February 28th. You know, some will look at it as, you know, Iran was going through their own civil disobedience with their civil riots and mass murder of estimation about 40,000 people. Iranian regime says it's about 3,000 odd, but, you know, other organizations have said it's about, you know, 30,000 plus to 40,000 almost, 35 to 40,000 people killed. And so when you have such massive conflict occurring in a specific country, other countries who have long-standing conflicts will see it as the weakest point, that okay, this country's weak right now, they're in a civil uprising, there's protests, this is the right time to attack. This is what happened in 1980 after the 1979 revolution in Iran, where the king, the Shah, was overthrown and the Islamic regime was brought in, creating the Islamic Republic of Iran under Ayatollah Khomeini. Not Khamenei, who was just killed, Khomeini, the predecessor.
Ruhollah Khomeini.
Yes, Ruhollah Khomeini. And that is when Iraq decided that they were going to invade and start the war, because they saw the country in chaos, essentially. And that war went on for 8 years. And Iran will say that they won the war because they didn't have to give in, and it was settled. So you have this situation when you saw, you know, Russia believed it's going to, you know, cross the border, invade Ukraine because it was going to be a quick thing, or what President Trump has said, how he thought it was going to be a quick thing in Iran, in and out, change the regime. And so it's proven otherwise. And unfortunately, when war starts, it takes on a logic of its own that wasn't as predetermined, because you could have all the maps, all the strategy, you know, you could play out any number of scenarios, but it always doesn't come through the way it's supposed to be. Yeah. Maybe perhaps what happened in Venezuela with Maduro, quick in and out, and, you know, changing the head of that nation, was something that came down to strategy and gave a lot of confidence for the president of the United States. But unfortunately, this is a different beast altogether, which we can talk about why. Which we did talk about previously. It's completely different. This isn't like there was an opposition party or second in command and you just install and then you negotiate with them. And also, when you kill, you know, the Ayatollah Khamenei and you kill the top administration, you also don't leave any room for negotiations with anyone for any sort of a change in leadership, right? And so when you kill everybody you could have negotiated with, you know, now the country's gone dark, right? And no one's seen the new Ayatollah, which is Khamenei's son, No one has seen him. No one has seen a video of him. He did release a statement, but it wasn't a video statement at all. So no one knows his state at all or where he is, and even if he's alive, even though Iran says yes, he is alive, this is a very dark situation in that sense. So who do you negotiate with is the question.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. You made some very good points, and just to further your points that you made, 3 points that you just made up, I will just further them. You're right. First things first, I think you're right. The president might have gotten some sort of confidence that yes, whatever action they did in Venezuela, everything happened pretty quickly. And this time, as you just mentioned, maybe they thought they'll go there and in a quick time, you just mentioned quick time. Maybe in a quick time they thought we'll take out the regime or do the regime change and this. But I think if you're right, I mean, things don't turn out the way. There's one thing, the planning is one thing, but then things could be very different. That's why I always request, if you have to be a journalist, 8 hours of reading, 4 hours of current news, but 4 hours of history for sure. So that'll give us the context. So I think the context was missing in this case. And I'll also question the planning. I'm not sure, I could be wrong, but I'll question the planning itself to further your point. That where was the planning? Venezuela? Almost a perfect execution of the plan, but here, where was the planning? And they're changing the goalpost quite often, so were you planning to do a regime change? If you're planning to do a regime change, then as you just mentioned, who would you leave for the negotiation, right? Who would you leave for negotiation? So not much of room for that. The second part is, when US, we were talking about the Gulf War the other day, and I was about to say that day as well, but then we flow. So, but when you're looking at the Gulf War in 1991, at that time there were around 800,000 troops. That was a massive buildup of troops at that time. Even, okay, forget that, which was the other one. When we didn't participate in the 2003 war. Even at that time, there were 350,000 troops. So, and England was part of that, though Canada was not part of that. And right now, how many troops do you have on ground? And most of the allies have refused. Yes, Canada was not even the part of the Iraq war, but we were there in Afghanistan. So if US, first things first, I think the planning that they did, I will question that. I'm not saying that I know the plan, or I could say that I could be wrong. But where is the planning? That is question number one. Second, if you look at the previous wars that US did, the number of troops that were on ground were much more than what we have right now. And even the US bases have been targeted. Just today there was another base that was targeted. So they're mostly evacuating. So where would you station those troops? Iran is hitting missiles and drones continuously, not only against Israel, but also against so many other countries. So where would you base those troops? Would you take them to, the mainland of Iran? Would you take them there? Iran is not a small country. It's huge in terms of demographic. It's huge in terms of 91 million population. So Iran is, even Iraq for that matter, when in 2000, when we went against war in Iraq in 2003, Iraq is demographically quite a smaller country as compared to Iran. So here we are dealing with Iran now. And another aspect is that we've seen what happened in Vietnam War. We've seen what happened in Afghanistan. We've seen what happened in Iraq. As much as, initially Bush was able to claim victory, but later on we had to move out of Iraq. There wasn't much. How do you even define success? How do we define success in Afghanistan? How do we define success in Vietnam? And how would we define success here in Iran? So I think if we go by the history, there have been a lot of challenges. So I thought so this war should have been better planned. And if someone says this, that yes, wars are not won like this, I'll share a quick story, This was the first quarter of 1971. 1971, the first quarter, and India's Prime Minister at that time, Srimati Indira Gandhi, they were almost about to go war against Pakistan, 1971. And at that time, she invited her general, General Sam Manekshaw. So the Indian General Sam Manekshaw, he told the Indian Prime Minister, no, we're not in a position to, go ahead with a war against Pakistan. At that time, it was East Pakistan and West Pakistan. So Bangladesh wasn't formed at that time. This is 1971, first quarter we're talking. So he said, okay, fine, when would you... He said, let me plan. We're talking about the planning. So General Sam, the Indian General Sam said, ma'am Prime Minister, let me plan. And Sam Manekshaw, we know his style, and he had his own way to do things, and he could refuse the Prime Minister. Today, I doubt if anybody can refuse President Trump, because there was a deep state, there's still a deep state which was very active during his first term, but I think in this term, President Trump has his own advisors, Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, Lindsey Graham. So he turns to them more often than not for advice. Okay, give me the what is this planning? What is this planning? So the deep state in the US, I think so, I could be wrong. I think he's trying to give them a pushback. You have so much intelligence. CIA is one of the most powerful intelligence agencies of the world. And at that time, so what India did, General Sam Manekshaw, so General Sam, he told the Indian intelligence, and at that time Cow was the head for the Indian intelligence raw. So he pushed his intelligence that okay, start working in these areas. Prime Minister, she went to different countries. Everyone refused. England said no, we're going to come against you. We're going to be against you, England. France said we have to come against you. The only thing we will remain neutral is if Pakistan attacks you first. She went to Nixon, Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon. They were very furious. President Nixon at that time clearly told Srimati Indira Gandhi, you can do whatever planning you want. If you dare to look against Pakistan, we will send you in the Stone Age. Don't ever do that. And he made some very nasty remarks as well, which I will not repeat over here, regarding her looks and stuff. And she was actually made to wait outside as well. Fast forward that, this was first quarter till the mid of 1971. Fast forward that to December 1971. December 1971, Pakistan attacks India. So now almost all countries, England, France says, okay, we'll stay neutral. Now neutral because earlier they would have supported Pakistan, but now neutral because Pakistan has attacked India. So France is neutral, but they have England, you have US out of all the countries. And Nixon had already threatened Indira Gandhi that if there is a war, we will teach you a lesson. And they wanted to teach India a lesson because India was non-aligned, but slightly leaning towards Russia. So they said, okay, here is a chance to teach a country who's leaning towards communism. They had a democratic setup to teach them a lesson. The war started in December. In just couple of weeks, despite all the pressure and everything, India successfully defeated Pakistan in just a couple of weeks. Why? Because there was a lot of planning that went behind, and that was the style General Sam, Sam Manekshaw told the Indian Prime Minister, this is my style. And around 81, and you know how much India had around at that time 800,000. That was the strength of the Indian army at that, and now it's more. Pakistan at that time had around 350, the same amount of strength that US had in Iraq, for 350,000 troops. So 350,000 troops for Pakistan, around 800,000 plus. But if you add all those Mukti Bahinis and all that, I think India would surpass 1 million people fighting on one side. They were not nuclear powers at that time, and on this side you had around 4,000 plus on the Pakistan side. But they had planned, they executed that as per the plan. In just 2 weeks, Pakistan General Niazi, he signed on the document. They laid down their arms, they have pictures and everything. And one of the things, they divided Pakistan. This is exactly what Israel wants to do right now with Iran. This is exactly what US wants to do with Iran, but definitely Israel wants to do with Iran. They want to divide it into smaller countries, but India was able to do that. So East and West Pakistan, so East Pakistan is gone, it becomes Bangladesh, a new country is born. So they divided the forces. So if at all the planning is right, you can, and I'm telling you, here are 350,000 plus forces. So you could well imagine how well they executed. But things could go horribly wrong as well. So where do you think, what was the planning wrong, or what went wrong? What went wrong for US?
I think when it comes to the president, I think he's in a situation where we know that he's not a historian. We know he's not a diplomat. we know so many things about him. What we know about his brand is that he's a businessman that became president, right? He didn't serve in any capacity in government. He wasn't a congressman. He wasn't a senator. He was nothing. He went from private citizen, branded as a very successful businessman, to president. So he does rely on his advisors for information, and it seems like when you hear him talk in the media, and a lot of times he just speaks off the cuff and he freestyles, and I think, to a big degree that's been part of his success in politics, because people felt like, there's some level of someone being genuine without talking points, without sounding too intellectual, I shall say, with very simple language and just speaking. So when you watch how he has responded through all this, what he's been talking about in these past, 4 weeks, it's very consistent that we were told this, I didn't know, and I was told by Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, or Steve Wilkoff, that they were going to attack. This was our way to protect Americans. Or he'd say negotiations are going well, and then next thing you know, there is an attack, or there is line of communication, and the other side says no. So it seems like there is misinformation within that administration, because nothing is consistent or cohesive. They're not all saying the same thing, right? And then you have the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War. I mean, what is his background, right? He was on Fox News. So there's also the questions of, like, are the right people in the right places, right? And then there's a term of neocons, which are people who believe that the U.S. should, use their force, military force, on the world. And you have the Lindsey Grahams, and you have, the others who will be on those talking points. And what's very shocking to say is that Trump was always the politician, you could say, who was against forever wars, not having American troops in the Middle East, in those long wars under previous administrations. This is what he campaigned on. This is what he won on, to be able to focus on domestic issues, to be able to, hours, like his whole method was always, you do the big events where you have thousands of people pour in, tens of thousands of people pour in, and he would talk about how American infrastructure is falling apart, education rate, this, that, pharmacare, having access to, cheaper drugs. This was what he campaigned on. This is what the MAGA movement came before, because they were tired of American tax dollars going to fund other countries' wars and to kill their own people who are sent in terms of troops to wars that are not theirs. And a lot of conservative supporters, Trump, what he did well was he went on a lot of podcasts, specifically on YouTube. He didn't go to as much on mainstream as much as he did on YouTube, which is where a lot of people are listening to what's going on, from young people to, older people. And there's
Joe Rogan show.
Joe Rogan, yes. But then he went to, that was the biggest, but he went to so many other ones. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those conservative ones are now turning against him, and not against him, but really questioning his judgment, right? And you can imagine that is really what the consensus of the American people are, because no one asked for this war, right? Because usually when you decide to launch a war at this level of scale, you go to Congress, mm-hmm. And usually there's some sort of what you may call propaganda, or some sort of a campaign that is put out there, whether it's through movies, whether it's through interviews, whether it's through their mainstream news networks, about a certain line, about a specific country who is not an ally, who has a way of living that is against democracy, whatever the talking points are, right? It's usually against democracy, or it's inhumane. They don't really talk about, hey, we want to go for natural resources. Trump's been the first president that's openly talked about going after natural resources, hence the case in Venezuela, or what he wants to do with Greenland, or when he talks about taking Canadian sovereignty because of Canadian oil or Greenland being in the right situation. Or he's openly says it, right? The previous presidents would come across, oh, it's human rights, it's this, it's not our ideologies, or whatever the talking points were, whatever they pushed on the campaign. So this was very sudden. And
pretty much killing all the conspiracy theories. I think he's very open about it, very candid about it. So maybe a lot of Americans would always talk about a lot of conspiracy theories. So I think he's pretty much killing all that. Sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah. The first time he ran, he was talking about the system and how it's rigged against the common man. And he's like, I know it's rigged against the common man is because I use those tax loopholes, right? He said it. He goes, I'm wealthy because I use those things. So I know, like, he always says the right things in an election mode because it was refreshing to have someone who's speaking so blatantly and what would appear honestly versus somebody who is, in a tie and suit, talking points, sounding very smart, very policy dense. The average person doesn't understand the policies if you're going to go policy heavy. Like when it was Clinton's election, right? Hillary Clinton, very heavy on policy. People didn't understand it. He was saying build a wall, right? So this is a massive contrast to
saying build a wall.
Yeah, that's what people remembered, right? And she talked about so many things that people don't remember.
Yeah.
And many will say she was much more qualified, but people mistrust politicians, right? And the switch and bait. And unfortunately, he's now become one of those mistrusted politicians because of all of these actions. And I'm talking specifically from the perspective of his base. Of course, the Democrats and all that, they have their own points against him, but his own base is wondering what's happened. This is a switch and bait. So now, and then we can move over to Israel and know that they have a much different situation than Trump can even wrap his head around, as you would assume, because he's not articulate on any of those situations. So there is a lot of consensus within even the Republican base that Trump was co-opted into this war by Benjamin Netanyahu. And whether Trump wants to admit it, and many of them will say that they believe that Jared Kushner and Steve Wilcox are they were acting as if in the interest of Israel by giving him the advice to go ahead. And just very recently, within the past day or so, I was listening to the Iranian Foreign Affairs spokesperson. His name is Ismail Baghai. And he was saying that they had talks 2 days before the bombing on February 28th, and they were due to so they had the talks on Thursday, the bombing happened on a Saturday, and they were due to talk again on a Monday, and everything from that was coming that it was progressing in the right direction, the negotiations. So they said, this was we thought we're going to go back for negotiations on the Monday, and on Saturday, you had the top level of the Iranian regime killed, right, essentially. So now, if you ask the question, how will this war end, it's very difficult because now the demands on both sides are so high that who knows how they're going to be able to negotiate it. The demands before the war were something that would have been achievable to many degrees. It was about nuclear activity. It was about so many of those things that could have been achieved, and we heard from both sides that things were progressing the right way. Now, after this war, Iran says, we want U.S. out of the GCC nations. We want them out of the Middle East in terms of the base. That's not going to happen. The U.S. isn't going to pack up and leave. Their interest in that region is the petrodollar, right? All oil, everything, the transactions are in the dollar. Them having presence there in their military base ensures that those countries are reliant on the United States for a military force. They invest back into the United States. The entire United States economy, the way it's still surviving is because the money that pours in and how the dollar is the basis of transaction for these things. So that's not going to happen. And Iran is saying, well, And I'm not talking about Iran as the Iranian people. That's another devastating point about what the Iranian people are going through. I'm just talking about specifically from the regime's perspective. You have the regime that says, well, we can't take any guarantees from you because this was the second time where we're negotiating in good faith and we have been attacked. And also they want to create a situation where they will not be attacked by the United States, and the only guarantee would be if the United States leaves the region. So that's not going to happen. The other aspect of it is, can you get to a place where Israel and Iran are going to come to terms? It seems like, what do they really want from each other, right? And you know sometimes when you get into a fight with someone and you're just fighting for fighting, you don't actually want to resolve it, because if you were to like sit down and talk about like, what is your concern? How can I meet your concern? How can we meet each other halfway? And sometimes what you want could be so big that the other side's not able to give it, and what the other side wants is something that you're not able to negotiate on. And it appears between Israel and Iran that would be the case, because you have to really think about what is it, and aside from like the geopolitical stuff, and aside from their history, there's also religion, there's also a lot of different things that are at play and ideologies that are at play. But we are in a situation where you have a lot of nations not feeling safe. The latest number of militarizing the world in terms of the countries is now at $2.7 trillion. That is a 9.4% increase since the Cold War ended. So countries don't remilitarize if they don't feel safe, right? And we're seeing that happen. The numbers, the latest numbers of the United States rushing to pass the ability for the GCC countries to arm themselves is massive. We're looking at a number of $16.5 billion in arms sales from the United States to UAE, which is United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. So that is going to be the southern peninsula of what you're seeing in the Strait of Hormuz that's closed. Right now, the Strait of Hormuz is closed, and so that's a reduction of 75% worth of oil that was already going out from that place. 1/5 of the world gets their oil from the Strait of Hormuz from these countries. Iran just has the choking point, and all these other nations I just listed are below it, and they don't have the military capacity of Iran. If I can just give you some numbers about how it affects things. So when it comes to, before it was about 20 million barrels a day were going through the Strait of Hormuz, and India relies 60% of its oil from that region, China 40%, and Japan 75%. Japan is estimating that if they go 8 months without access to oil from that region, they're going to run out. So it's a very devastating situation, and we know China, 40% of it of their oil comes from that region. We know that China is a manufacturing hub for export, right? So they need the cheap energy. That is their economy. They're not built in any other capacity to do such. And then you have now insurance, war insurance for those oil vessels have gone up 50% because it's at target right now. And Iran has closed that chokehold, which has now changed that goalpost for Trump that maybe we can't have a regime change, because you had so many people with experience in the military who said, you cannot do a regime change unless you're going to do boots on the ground. And boots on the ground is what they termed as a suicide mission, meaning Iran is a country with mountains. Like, it's got different terrain, and this regime has been there for 47 years, really preparing for days like this, right? If they were able to, in the Iran and Iraq war, sustain 8 years when they were fresh after the regime change within a year, you can imagine 47 years of planning, right? When it comes to, if I can just tell you about Iran, what they produce is about 500 drones a day. They have about 80,000 in stockpiles. It costs about $50,000 per drone, and these drones will hit the desanitization plants, which give fresh water, essentially, to those Gulf states. The Gulf states are desert, right? Yes, if you go to Dubai, you'll see grass.
Desalination plants, huh?
Yeah, you'll see grass, but it's a desert, right? So and when it comes to the stats you have, when it comes to fresh water, 90% of those Gulf states that are now purchasing arms from the United States rely on those fresh water. It's about 70% Saudi Arabia, 90% of it is 80% is Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain rely on fresh water from access. There's about 400 of those plants. Iran is hitting infrastructure. They're hitting those plants, which about 100 million people rely on fresh water from that. I haven't even talked about fertilizer yet. And so what happens is, as the American defense missiles go to shoot down those drones, it costs them about $1 million. So you could see Iran is hitting with $50,000 drone, and it costs the Americans $1 million to shoot it down. That's a $950,000 deficit difference. Estimate of this war for the United States is about $1 billion a day, right? And I know I'm talking about numbers, and I'm talking about, natural resources. Yes, there's a lot of death happening, but my greater point is that this is going to be a war in the grocery store, right? You're going to see when heating becomes expensive, when your food becomes expensive, when it comes to fertilizer. That's gone about a 35% increase, right? That affects many different countries. In Europe, fertilizer, the cost to grow your crops has gone up 60%. India relies on fertilizer to have crops for domestic consumption alone. So we're talking about mass famine for places like. Even all those southern GCC countries from Iran, they import about 80% of their food because it's a sand. It can't grow. They don't have the climate capabilities to do that. So, all of this is multiplying factors, right? And when wars have a logic of their own, because nations don't necessarily sit down and decide, oh, we're all going to go to war now. It's usually, a lot of misinformation, bad planning, reaction, and then that's why you're seeing this entire ability to, buy arms. Like, you look at the NATO nations, now 18 of them have hit their target of 2%. Sweden has now hit 3.4%. Canada, I shouldn't even say finally, because it's such a sad day to talk about, arming ourselves, because it creates a situation of how safe do people feel. There's a lot more I can talk about, but please, there's.
No, please carry on.
No, for now, please carry on.
Yeah, no, I was listening. Yeah, you made some very, very good points. Yeah, I think you're right. At least I will not celebrate Canada hitting a target of 2% and many NATO countries hitting a target of 2%. I know they hit a target of 2%, and there was a lot of news about that. It's nothing to celebrate. I mean, we're arming ourselves. These billions of dollars that we've already spent, and the billions of dollars now we are planning to hit the target of 5% of our GDP, 5% of our GDP, and it's not just Canada. The unfortunate part is, Germany, England, and out of all countries, Japan. They have to shift on their plan B, because here is US, they're having their own challenges. And I think, first things first, the way Trump imposed tariffs, the way US imposed tariffs on all these countries, then they're talking about taking away Greenland, talking of making Canada a 51st state, and calling Justin Trudeau or Mark Carney as the governor. He's called Mark Carney the governor recently as well. And then, all these European nations, Japan, Australia, South Korea, out of all the countries, South Korea said, what did I do to face all these tariffs? And, the word that I want to highlight over here is there is a lot of trust deficit. That's the word I want to highlight. There is a lot of trust deficit that we are seeing, and precisely that is the reason this is a bigger question at two points actually. There are many points, but just in the interest of time, I'll say 2 points, and then maybe we'll go on a short break, and then we'll come back after this break. 2 points I quickly want to make. One is, you're right. I mean, all this money that we're spending, billions of dollars, 2% of our GDP target achieved. Okay, now 5% of GDP. Where is all this money going? All this money is going to, the weapons manufacturers in different parts of the world, especially maybe US, China, France, Germany, whoever are the weapon manufacturers. I mean, today we are discussing whether we should go with the Swedish, planes, or the F-35s by US. We've already placed orders for 12. Otherwise, we would have been out of the line. Oh, there is a lineup. There is always a lineup that, we want to book our 12 planes. And with Saudi Arabia, from Saudi Arabia to UAE to India, India has become one of the largest importers of weapons as well. So all these countries are arming themselves. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but definitely I will not celebrate if some country says we have achieved 2% of our GDP in arms production or in arms export, or we are spending 2% of our GDP. The other part is, I think all this money could have easily been used, in education, healthcare, research. A lot of people are struggling with so many challenges health-wise. I mean, put this money towards cancer research, put this money towards education, put this money towards developing infrastructure. There's so many people across the globe who don't have food. Imagine there is so much of food insecurity. So we can put this money towards serving those people. And this is what do you expect? What else do you expect from our leaders? What else do we expect from our leaders? Leadership is all about how do we solve the issues? How do we act in crisis? That is what leadership is all about. But here we are, looking at all these challenges. And to your earlier point that you made, yes, you're right. I mean, in India, Bangladesh, Brazil, so many countries who are witnessing shortage of fertilizers, urea, gas. So there is a shortage of cylinder as well. It could be due to the hoarding as well, but definitely there is shortage of gas cylinders in India. There are challenges already mounting, and challenges could be more. And you're right, after 3 months or 4 months, things could be very difficult. And I can tell you that if this war continues for, I would say, 2 to 3 months, you could see these oil prices per barrel, easily climb 140, 150 or even more. I don't know. And Iran is definitely, on a mission. It says, I've lost quite a lot of things. And you're right. I mean, those drones or all those missiles that Iran is using, you could fire a drone that Iran is using through your phone. Just set up, done. And you're right. I mean, it would cost maybe 5,000, 10,000. Some of them are 20,000, 25,000. And here is the Tomahawk missiles, 500,000, million, some even till 2 million. So, and you have no choice but to keep on intercepting them. And Iran is not firing at one place. Iran is firing at least 8 to 10 different countries. Some missiles and drones towards Israel, towards Saudi Arabia, towards Bahrain, Oman. You're right. Last day Oman was negotiating, and the next thing you know, talks are off the table, and Oman is also being hit. And we'll take a short break here, and right after this short break, we will carry on our discussion. We will definitely talk about when this war will end, and how this war could end. There are some possible scenarios. We'll talk about this after a very, very short break. Stay tuned with Ymedia.
Ymedia. Ymedia. Ymedia.
Ymedia.
Ymedia.
Stay tuned with Ymedia.